My dad's name is General Marcus Thompson. He's stationed at the Pentagon. You can call and verify.
Can you believe this? What do you think, class?
Honey, generals don't come from neighborhoods like yours.
You are lying. Your dad can't be a 4-star general. Tell me the truth now before I report you to the school authority.
Teacher mocks black boy's essay. Dad can't be general. Goes pale when 4-star dad enters room. Mrs. Hargrove is still laughing when Malik looks up. Not a real laugh. The kind adults use when they want a room full of children to laugh with them. And some of them do, nervous, uncertain. The way kids laugh when a teacher gives them permission to. She's holding his essay with 2 fingers. Like it's something she found at the bottom of a drawer. A 4-star general. She lets the words hang in the air, turns to face the class. Class, Malik would like us to believe his father commands armies. More laughter. Louder now. Malik doesn't move. His father's portrait sits on the corner of his desk. Official military photo, dress uniform, 4 stars on each shoulder. Exactly as he placed it before standing up to present. He looks at it for just a second. Then back at her. My dad's name is General Marcus Thompson, he says. He's stationed at the Pentagon. You can call and verify. Mrs. Hargrove tilts her head. Honey. She sets the essay face down on her desk. Generals don't come from neighborhoods like yours. 26 kids go completely still. And then the bell rings, and Malik is sent to the principal's office, and everyone seems to think that's the end of it. Nobody thinks about the portrait he carries out under his arm. Nobody thinks about his mother, and who she's already calling. Before we get into this unbelievable story, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're tuning in from. It's amazing to see how far our Curious Chronicles family reaches. If you love heart-stopping or inspiring stories that make you feel everything, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We share epic, can't look away tales every week. Let's jump in. 3 hours before that moment, Malik Thompson stood in front of his bathroom mirror buttoning his collar. He didn't usually do that. He was 12. Collars were for church and funerals. But today felt like something that deserved a collar. He'd worked 11 days on this essay, longer than any assignment he'd ever done, and he wanted to look like someone who had. His mother appeared in the doorway behind him, still in her nursing scrubs from the night shift. You eat? Yes. She looked at the collar, said nothing about it, just walked over, adjusted it slightly so it sat flat, and pressed her palm briefly against his shoulder. You ready? He held up the manila folder. Inside, 4 printed pages, double-spaced, every fact verified twice. And beneath the folder, wrapped in a plastic sleeve, his father's official military portrait, the one that had hung in their living room since before Malik could remember. He'd asked permission to take it. His mother had taken it off the wall herself and placed it in his hands. He'd want you to have it today, she said. She didn't say good luck. She said, tell your truth. Stand in it. That's all. He didn't understand why she said it like that, like a warning dressed up as encouragement, until later. Jefferson Middle School sat 12 minutes from their apartment, depending on the lights. Malik walked it every day. He knew every crack in the sidewalk, every corner where the wind cut cold, every storefront that opened early, and which ones had security cameras that tracked you whether you were doing anything wrong or not. He walked in that morning the way he always walked, head up, pace steady, folder tucked against his chest. Mrs. Hargrove's 7th grade English class had been running the My Hero project all week. 26 students, each presenting a 5-minute oral essay about the most important person in their life. The assignment was worth 20% of their semester grade. Malik had been watching the presentation since Monday. Tyler went first. His dad managed a regional bank branch downtown. Mrs. Hargrove had written the word impressive on the whiteboard, underlined it twice, and told Tyler he should be proud. Then Grace. Her father coached high school football. Character building work, Mrs. Hargrove had said, nodding slowly. The world needs more men like that. Then Connor, whose father owned a car dealership. Small business is the backbone of America, Mrs. Hargrove had declared, and she'd actually started a small round of applause. Malik had sat through all of it, folder on his desk, father's portrait face down, waiting. He was not naive. He was 12, not 7. He had been in Mrs. Hargrove's classroom since September, and he had learned, the way you learn things that nobody announces, that she had a very specific idea of who he was, where he came from, what that meant about where he was going. 2 months earlier, she'd stopped him after class, pointed at the mechanical pencil set on his desk, a gift his father had mailed from the Pentagon, and asked, in a quiet voice, "Malik, where did you get the money for those?" When he said his dad had sent them, she tilted her head and said, "If something's going on at home, you can tell me." He hadn't understood what she was implying. He'd gone home and repeated the conversation to his mother word for word. Angela Thompson had listened without interrupting. Then she turned back to the stove. "Okay, baby," she said. That was all. Last month, Mrs. Hargrove had handed back his essay on military strategy with a red note. This reads like it was copied. Sources. He'd rewritten it in class while she watched from her desk. He'd written it better the second time, because his father had spent an entire Saturday teaching him about the Battle of Midway using salt shakers on the kitchen table. She'd given him a C+. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," she'd said. He'd kept working harder, kept believing that precision was the answer, that if he was thorough enough, careful enough, undeniable enough, she would eventually have no choice but to see him accurately. That was the bet he was placing today. His father's portrait under one arm. 11 days of truth in a folder. He walked into room 114 and took his seat. He did not know yet that his mother had hesitated before saying "tell your truth," because Angela Thompson had spent the last 3 years quietly watching Mrs. Hargrove do this to other people's children, and filing it away, and waiting, the way a woman who has worked 12-hour nursing shifts for 17 years learns to wait, for exactly the right moment. That moment, it turned out, was today. It just hadn't arrived yet. Malik stood up when his name was called, walked to the front of the room, and began. And Mrs. Hargrove started smiling about 30 seconds in. Not the good kind. 2 days before Mrs. Hargrove laughed at his father's name, Malik Thompson sat at the kitchen table at 11:17 at night with a pencil in his hand and a blank line staring back at him. Not the whole page. Just one line. He'd written everything else. 4 pages, front and back in his notebook, then typed and retyped until the words sat the way he wanted them to. The opening paragraph about his father enlisting at 19 with nothing but a bus ticket and a decision. The middle section about Iraq, about Afghanistan, about the Bronze Star his father never talked about but which sat in a shadow box in the hallway between the bathroom and Malik's bedroom. The closing argument, because that's what it felt like, an argument, a case being made to a jury he hadn't yet met, about what it meant to watch someone earn everything from nothing. The blank line was the title. His mother appeared from the hallway, nursing scrubs exchanged for a sweatshirt, reading glasses on, a mug of something warm in her hand. She looked at the page over his shoulder without being invited to, which was a thing she did and which Malik had stopped minding years ago. She read for a long moment. He watched her face in his peripheral vision. Angela Thompson had a particular expression she made when she was proud of something but didn't want to oversell it, a kind of compressed stillness, like she was holding the feeling in carefully so it didn't spill. She was making that expression now. "The part about the stars," she said quietly. "Read it to me." He found the paragraph near the bottom of page 2. "When I was 5, I asked my dad what the stars on his uniform meant. He said they meant he was responsible for the people underneath him. I asked how many people. He said thousands. I didn't understand that number then. I still don't, fully. But I understood that he said it the same way he said everything, like it was simply true, and truth didn't need decoration." Angela was quiet. "Keep that," she said. "I wasn't going to take it out." "I know," I'm just saying keep it. She touched the top of his head once, the way she'd done since he was small, and went back toward the hallway. Then she stopped. Malik. He looked up. She seemed to be deciding something. He could see it, the small calculation behind her eyes, the weighing of what to say against what not to say and why. Just tell the truth in that room, she said finally. Whatever happens, you told the truth. That part can't be taken from you. He didn't know what to do with that, so he nodded. She went to bed. He wrote the title, My Hero. Simple. Obvious. Maybe. But he'd learned from his father that the simplest statement, said with full conviction, was harder to argue with than anything clever. He went to the living room to get the portrait. It had been on that wall his entire life. His father in full dress uniform. The photo taken at some formal military function 8 years ago when Malik was 4. General Marcus Thompson looked directly into the camera with the particular stillness of someone who had learned to be completely still under pressure. 4 stars on each shoulder. Ribbons stacked in rows across his chest. Each one a language Malik was still learning to read. Jaw level. Eyes clear. Malik stood in front of it for a while in the dark. He looked like his father. Everyone said so. Same jaw, same forehead, same way of going quiet when something mattered. He'd always taken it as a compliment. Standing there at nearly midnight, essay in hand, he felt the weight of it differently, not as inheritance but as responsibility. He took the portrait carefully off the wall. The next morning, he wrapped it in a plastic sleeve he'd found in his mother's filing cabinet, slid it into his backpack alongside the printed essay, and ate breakfast standing up because he was too focused to sit. Angela was already at the hospital. She'd left a note on the counter, fruit in the fridge. Call me after. He read it twice. Then he put it in his pocket. School was ordinary in the way that days before important things are always ordinary, indifferent to what they're about to contain. He sat through math, through science, through lunch, where his friend Deshaun asked him why he was so quiet and Malik said he was just thinking, which was true but incomplete. What he didn't say was that he'd been in this school for 2 years and he had learned its rhythms the way you learn any place that wasn't designed with you specifically in mind, carefully, defensively, always watching the gap between what was said and what was meant. What he didn't say was that every time Mrs. Hargrove handed back his work, there was something in her expression that was harder to name than bias. Something more specific. Like she had already decided who he was before he entered the room, and every A he earned was an inconvenience to that decision rather than an update to it. What he didn't say was that he'd almost not done the project about his father. He'd considered choosing someone safer. A historical figure. Frederick Douglass. Thurgood Marshall. Someone Mrs. Hargrove couldn't question or diminish, because they were already in the textbook, already validated by history, already inarguable. But that felt like a defeat he couldn't name and couldn't accept. His father was real. His father was alive. His father had earned every star on that uniform over 30 years of service to a country that hadn't always made it easy for him to serve it. And Malik was not going to walk into that classroom and choose a safe answer because some part of him was afraid she wouldn't believe the true one. He'd made that decision 2 weeks ago. He was standing by it now. The bell rang at 1:45. Malik picked up his backpack, felt the portrait through the canvas, solid, rectangular, real, and walked toward room 114. He was almost at the door when Deshaun caught up beside him in the hallway. Yo. Deshaun's voice was lower than usual. You presenting today? Yeah. Deshaun glanced toward the classroom door and then back at Malik. There was something in his face, not quite worry, not quite warning. Something he was deciding whether to say. What? Malik asked. Nothing, man. Deshaun shook his head. Good luck. He went inside ahead of him. Malik stood in the hallway for exactly 3 seconds. Then he pushed the door open and walked in. Mrs. Hargrove was at her desk, marking something with a red pen. She didn't look up when he entered. Didn't look up when the rest of the class filtered in. Didn't look up when the bell rang and the room settled. Then she set the red pen down. and she looked directly at him. "Malik," she said, "you're up first today." He hadn't been scheduled to go first. He knew that. He'd seen the list. He was fourth. He stood up anyway. He walked to the front of the room, set the portrait on the ledge of the whiteboard, facing the class, opened his essay to the first page. He could feel 26 people looking at the portrait. He could feel Mrs. Hargrove looking at it. She had already picked up her red pen again. "Whenever you're ready," she said, and the way she said it, patient, almost bored, the tone of someone who has already decided how this will end, sent something cold and certain through his chest. He looked at his father's face on the whiteboard. He looked at the class. He began. "My hero," Malik said, "is my father. His name is General Marcus Thompson. And before I finish talking, I'm going to prove everything I'm about to say." 2 rows back, he heard someone laugh. Not Deshawn. And when he looked up from his first page to find the source, he saw Mrs. Hargrove watching him with an expression he recognized from every month he'd been in this classroom. The precise, contained expression of someone who has already made up their mind. His essay was 4 pages long. She hadn't heard one sentence yet, and her red pen was already moving. He made it through the first page without interruption. That surprised him. He'd half expected her to stop him early, the way she sometimes cut students off mid-sentence to correct their pronunciation or their posture or some invisible thing only she could see. But she let him read, and for 60 seconds Malik almost believed this was going to go the way it was supposed to. Then he turned to page 2. He was 3 sentences in, the part about his father's first deployment, 19 years old, landing in a country he'd never seen, when Mrs. Hargrove made a sound. Not a word. Just a small exhale through her nose. The kind of sound that means I see what's happening here. Malik kept reading. By the time he reached the Bronze Star paragraph, she had set down her red pen and picked up his essay from her desk, the printed copy he'd submitted that morning. She was reading along. Or appearing to. Her expression had shifted from the flat boredom she'd worn through Connor's presentation and Grace's presentation into something more focused, more pointed. He finished page 2. Started page 3. Malik. He stopped. "This general." She held up the essay. Tapped the page. "General Marcus Thompson. You're claiming this is your father." "He is my father." "Currently stationed where?" "The Pentagon. His deputy chief of staff for operations." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the portrait on the whiteboard, his father's face, 4 stars, 30 years of service arranged in ribbons across his chest, with an expression Malik couldn't fully decode. Not surprise. Something closer to the look a person gets when they've decided something is wrong but haven't yet settled on why. "How old are you, Malik?" 12. "And your father is a 4-star general." She said it the way you'd repeat back something someone said at the wrong volume. "In the United States Army." "Yes. She set the essay down. Folded her hands. "Do you know how many 4-star generals are serving in the active United States Army right now?" He did know. His father had told him. "There are currently 7 active 4-star generals in the Army," he said. "My dad is one of them." Something crossed her face then. A decision being made. She stood up. "Class," she said, turning away from Malik toward the 26 faces watching from their desks, "this is a good opportunity to talk about what we call exaggeration for effect." She picked up his essay again. Read a line aloud, the one about his father shaking hands with 3 presidents, in a tone that made it sound like something a child had invented in the back seat of a car. "Sometimes, when we want to impress people, we reach for details that are a little," she paused, "larger than the truth." A few students laughed. Short, uncertain sounds. Malik was still standing at the front of the room. "Mrs. Hargrove," he said, keeping his voice level, "I can prove everything in that essay. His official bio is on the Army website. His office number." Malik. She said his name the way you say a word when you're tired of hearing it. I've been teaching for 20 years. I can recognize when a student is building a story around a photograph. She gestured toward the portrait. Anyone can print a military photo. Anyone can write stars on a uniform. The room went completely still. Malik looked at the portrait. His father's face. The stars that weren't written on, they were pinned on, earned on, bled for over 3 decades of service that Mrs. Hargrove had just reduced to something anyone could fake on a home printer. That's his official army photograph, Malik said. You can look up the file name. It's on the Department of Defense Media Archive. Sit down, Malik. I haven't finished my presentation. You're finished. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the room. 26 kids not moving, not breathing, watching the space between Malik and Mrs. Hargrove like it was something that might break. Malik picked up his essay from the whiteboard ledge. He picked up his father's portrait. He walked back to his desk and sat down without looking at anyone. Mrs. Hargrove wrote something on the grading sheet. She wrote it slowly, deliberately, in the particular way people write things when they want you to know they're writing them. He didn't need to see the grade. The number she said aloud, 10 minutes later when she handed back the sheets, was 47. 47 out of 100. She had graded it before he read the second page. He understood that now. The red pen moving before he'd said 50 words. The note to the principal's office came at the end of class, folded once, placed on his desk by Mrs. Hargrove without eye contact. Disruptive behavior during student presentations. Please speak with Mr. Vance at 2:30. Deshawn watched him read it from 3 rows back. Their eyes met for a second. Deshawn looked away first. Principal Harold Vance's office smelled like stale coffee and carpet cleaner. He was a large man who moved slowly and spoke in the measured cadence of someone who had learned to sound reasonable at the expense of being right. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Malik Saturday. The portrait was in his lap. The essay was folded in his back pocket. Vance looked at both of these things. Then he looked at Malik with the particular expression of someone who has already received one version of a story and is now performing the courtesy of hearing a second. Mrs. Hargrove tells me you became argumentative during your presentation, Vance said. I corrected a factual error, Malik said. She said my father's photograph could have been faked. It's an official Department of Defense image. Vance leaned back. She also mentioned the subject matter. This claim about your father. It's not a claim. His name is General Marcus Thompson. You can call the Pentagon Public Affairs Office. The number is... Malik. Vance held up one hand. Slow, patient, final. I understand you're proud of your family. That's admirable. But I need you to understand that when a teacher makes an academic decision, my job is to support the decision unless there is clear cause to review it. He paused. Mrs. Hargrove has been with this school for 11 years. She is a respected educator. She graded my essay before I finished reading it. Vance was quiet for a moment. That's a serious accusation. I watched her do it. He picked up a pen. Set it back down. I'd like you to have your parent or guardian come in tomorrow morning. We'll discuss this together, calmly, and see if we can reach an understanding. I can call my mom right now. Tomorrow morning, Malik. He wrote something on a slip of paper and slid it across the desk. 8 o'clock. Malik looked at the paper. A formal meeting request. A box checked. Academic conduct concerns. Potential escalation to written warning if unresolved. He read it twice. A written warning. If he had a written warning on his record, a conduct warning, his application to the district's advanced academic program closed in 6 weeks would be automatically reviewed for disqualification. His counselor had told him that in September. One conduct flag in the semester of application. He looked up at Principal Vance. Vance was already looking at the door. You can go, he said. Malik stood, picked up the portrait, walked out of the office into the empty hallway, the slip of paper in his hand, and stopped. He had one bar of signal on his phone. He needed to call his mother. But when he unlocked the screen, there was already a message from her, sent 4 minutes ago, which meant someone had called her before he even left the classroom. The message said, "Don't say anything else to anyone. I'm handling it." He read it 3 times. And then the door to the main office opened behind him, and the school secretary leaned out with an expression he'd never seen on her face before, something between alarm and apology, and said, "Malik, Mr. Vance needs you back inside." "I just left." "I know." She glanced down the hallway, then back at him. "There's someone on the phone. He wants to speak with you directly." She paused. "He says he's your father." Malik didn't move for a full second. Because his father never called during duty hours. Not for anything short of an emergency. Angela Thompson was in the middle of a 12-hour shift when her phone buzzed. She was in the medication room at Community General, 3rd floor, pulling a chart. She glanced at the screen out of habit. She always glanced, because Malik sometimes texted between classes. And when she saw the number was Jefferson Middle School, she felt something tighten in her chest that had nothing to do with surprise. She'd been half expecting this call since September. She stepped into the hallway, away from the nurse's station, and answered, "Mrs. Thompson." The voice was the school secretary, a woman named Donna who Angela had spoken to twice before. "This is Jefferson Middle. I'm calling regarding Malik. Is he hurt?" No, nothing like that. There's been an incident. In class." Angela leaned her shoulder against the wall. "What kind of incident?" A pause. "Mrs. Hargrove has referred him to Principal Vance's office. There were some concerns raised during his presentation today. The word Mrs. Hargrove used was argumentative." "What was he arguing about?" Another pause. Shorter this time. The content of his essay. Angela closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. "Was anyone hurt?" she asked. "No." "Did he raise his voice?" I don't believe so, no." "Did he leave his seat without permission? Use inappropriate language? Threaten anyone?" "Mrs. Thompson, I'm asking what he actually did," Angela said. Not loudly. Not with an edge that could be described as hostile. Just evenly, the way a woman asks a question when she already understands that the answer is going to be smaller than the reason for the call. Donna was quiet for a moment. "He disputed Mrs. Hargrove's assessment of his essay," she said. "And he was unresponsive to her request to sit down. He finished his presentation." "No." She asked him to stop. "Before he finished." "Yes." Angela said nothing for a moment. "Mr. Vance is requesting a meeting tomorrow morning," Donna continued. 8 o'clock. "There's a potential academic conduct notation being considered, and..." "I'll be there," Angela said. She hung up. She stood in the hallway for a moment, her phone in both hands, looking at nothing in particular. A nurse passed her with a medication cart. The elevator at the end of the hall opened and closed. Somewhere behind her, a monitor beeped in its steady, indifferent rhythm. Then she pulled up her contacts and scrolled to a number she knew by memory but always saved anyway. Habit, or maybe superstition. The area code was 703. Northern Virginia. Pentagon Corridor. She pressed call. It rang 4 times, which meant he was in something. On the 5th ring, it picked up. "Angela." His voice was exactly the same as it always was, low, unhurried, with that specific quality of attention that made you feel like the only thing in the room even through a phone. "Marcus." She moved further down the hallway, past the elevator, toward the window at the end. "Something happened at Malik's school today." She told him. Not everything. She didn't have everything yet. But enough. The essay. The presentation. Hargrove's words as relayed through a school secretary who had been visibly uncomfortable repeating them. The conduct notation. The meeting. Marcus didn't interrupt. He never did. When she finished, there was a silence that lasted about 4 seconds, which for him was a long time. "How is he?" Marcus asked. "I don't know yet. I haven't spoken to him." "He called you?" "No. The school called me. Donna from the front office." Another silence. "Angela." "I know. This isn't the first time." "I know, Marcus. You told me about the pencils. The plagiarism accusation. That was twice before this." "I know." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it. Something that came from being a woman who had learned to absorb things quietly because the alternative was to be described as difficult, and being described as difficult had consequences she could not always afford. "I documented both of them. I have the dates. I have my notes." "Who else has she done this to?" Angela turned toward the window. Outside, the afternoon had gone grey. "I've spoken to 2 other mothers. Deshaun Carter's mom. A woman named Patricia whose son was in Hargrove's class 2 years ago and transferred out. There may be others." The silence on his end was different this time. Denser. "I need you to go get him," Marcus said. "I'm in the middle of a shift." "I know. Can you leave?" She looked down the hallway toward the nurse's station. Her charge nurse, Renata, was at the desk. They were already short-staffed. Leaving early meant someone else absorbed her remaining patients, her remaining hours, her remaining everything. "I can ask," she said. "Ask." "What are you going to do?" He was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to make some calls." She knew what that meant. She also knew what it would cost, not financially, not professionally, but in the particular currency of a black man in a senior position who has learned exactly how much authority he can visibly exercise before the word aggressive starts appearing in conversations he isn't part of. "Marcus," she said carefully. "I know," he said. "I know exactly what I'm doing." She believed him. That wasn't the part that worried her. "I'll call you when I have him," she said. She hung up. Walked back to the nurse's station. Renata looked up. "I need to leave early," Angela said. "Family situation." Renata studied her face for a moment. Nurses read faces the way other people read words, and whatever she saw there made her reach for the staffing clipboard without asking a single question. "Go," she said. Angela changed out of her scrubs in 4 minutes. She was in her car in 6. She drove the 12 minutes to Jefferson Middle School with both hands on the wheel and the radio off, running through the sequence of what came next. The meeting tomorrow. What she would say. What she would not say. How to be heard without being dismissed, which was its own exhausting calculus, one she had been performing in rooms like Vance's office her entire adult life. She pulled into the school parking lot at 3:41. Malik was sitting on the front steps. He had his backpack on his lap, his father's portrait tucked under his arm, and he was looking at the ground with the particular stillness of someone who has been holding themselves together in public for several hours and is nearly out of strength to do it. He looked up when her car pulled in. She got out without turning off the engine. He stood up. And something in his face, the way it shifted when he saw her, the small break in the composure he'd been carrying since 1:45, made her walk faster. She reached him and put both hands on his face and looked at him the way mothers look at their children when they need to see that nothing fundamental has been broken. "I'm okay," he said. "I know you are." She took the portrait from under his arm, looked at it for a moment, Marcus's face, the 4 stars, the ribbons, then held it carefully against her chest. "Get in the car," she said. He did. She walked around to the driver's side and was about to get in when her phone rang. She looked at the screen. It wasn't Marcus. It was a number she didn't recognize, a Washington, D.C. area code, different digits, and below it, in the preview notification from an email that had arrived simultaneously, a name that made her stand completely still beside her running car in the school parking lot. The name was Colonel Diane Reeves. Office of the Inspector General, United States Army. And the email subject line read, Re, Jefferson Middle School. Prior complaint file, urgent. Angela stared at it. Prior complaint file. She had never filed a complaint with the Army Inspector General. She had never contacted that office in her life, which meant someone else had. And they had done it before today. Marcus Thompson was 7 years old the first time he understood that the world had a ceiling built specifically for him. It happened in a classroom, which was either ironic or inevitable depending on how you looked at it. His third-grade teacher in Savannah, Georgia, had handed back a math test. Perfect score, every problem correct. And when Marcus raised his hand to ask about the extra credit question she hadn't graded, she looked at his paper, looked at him, and said, "I'll have to double-check your work." She checked it 3 times. It was still perfect. She never said anything was wrong. She simply moved on to the next student, and Marcus sat with his paper face down on his desk and learned something that no one had taught him directly, that being right was not always enough. That some rooms required you to be undeniable before they would grant you the courtesy of being believed. He spent the next 30 years becoming undeniable. Angela had heard most of this story in pieces. Marcus didn't tell it linearly, didn't sit down and narrate his own biography. She'd assembled it the way you assemble anything real, slowly, over years, from fragments offered at kitchen tables and in car rides, and in the specific honesty that comes at 2 in the morning when the house is quiet and the armor is temporarily down. She knew about Savannah. She knew about the rock recruiter at his high school who told him he'd be better suited for a vocational track. She knew about Fort Benning, where a sergeant had worked him twice as hard as everyone else, and Marcus had taken it as information rather than injustice. Information about what it would cost to be excellent in spaces that did not expect excellence from him. She knew about Iraq the first time, 2003, 26 years old, leading a platoon through conditions that changed by the hour. She knew he'd come back quieter than he left. She knew it had taken him 6 months to sleep through a full night, and that he'd never discussed the specific details and she had never pushed. She knew about the promotion board that passed him over the first time, 2009, he was 32, and the colonel who told him privately, with what seemed like genuine regret, that the board had concerns about his style. She knew Marcus had asked what that meant, and the colonel had looked away and said aggressive, and Marcus had said, "I've never raised my voice in a professional setting," and the colonel had said, "I know," and that had been the end of the conversation. She knew he'd made general anyway. Twice over. She knew what it had cost. Malik was 6 years old the first time he watched his father leave for a deployment. Angela remembered the morning with unusual precision, the specific grey of the dawn light, the way Malik had been carrying his stuffed elephant under one arm, barefoot on the front walk despite the cold. Marcus had crouched down in front of him in full uniform, bag at his feet, car waiting at the curb. "I'll be back before your birthday," Marcus had told him. "Promise." A pause. Marcus Thompson did not make promises he was uncertain of. Malik was 6 years old, and his father was already teaching him that without using those words. "I will do everything in my power," Marcus said instead. "That's all anyone can promise." Malik had looked at his father's shoulders. At the insignia. "What are those?" "Stars." "Why do you have them?" "Because people are counting on me." "How many people?" Marcus had considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "A lot." Malik had nodded slowly, processing. Then, "Are you scared?" And Marcus Thompson, 4-star general, Bronze Star recipient, 30 years of service, had looked his 6-year-old son in the eye and said, "Sometimes. But being scared doesn't mean you stop. It means you're paying attention." He'd kissed Malik once on the forehead, stood up, picked up his bag, and gotten in the car. Malik had stood on the front walk until the car turned the corner and disappeared. Angela had watched from the doorway, Malik's forgotten jacket in her hands, and felt the particular grief of loving people who have chosen necessary work. He missed the birthday. He called from a base in Afghanistan. Bad connection, 22 seconds of broken audio. Malik had held the phone with both hands and talked about the birthday cake. Chocolate, his choice, And Marcus had laughed, that low laugh that traveled through static and distance and still sounded like him. Like home. He made the next one. And the one after that. He was there for the first day of middle school, for the science fair where Malik built a working model of a trebuchet and won second place and handled second place with more grace than most adults manage. He was there for the evenings he could manage. Phone calls, video calls, the occasional week of leave spent at the kitchen table. Talking about history and strategy and, always, the same thing underneath all of it. How to move through a world that would sometimes try to tell you that you didn't belong in it. When that happens, Marcus had told Malik once, you don't argue. You demonstrate. What if they don't watch? You demonstrate anyway. You're not doing it for them. Now, sitting in the passenger seat of Angela's car in the Jefferson Middle School parking lot, Malik held his father's portrait in his lap and looked at it in the way he sometimes did, not examining it but absorbing it, the way you look at something that means more than it shows. Angela was outside the car. She'd stepped out to take a call. He'd watched her face change when she looked at the screen. She'd been standing beside the car for 3 minutes now, speaking quietly, her back half turned. He couldn't hear what she was saying, but he recognized the posture. It was the same posture she used when she was learning something that required her to stay calm in the receiving of it. She hung up, stood still for a moment. Then she got back in the car and sat with both hands in her lap, not reaching for the ignition. Mom. Give me a second. He gave her the second. She turned to look at him. Her expression was the one he couldn't fully read. Not worry, not anger. Something in between that was also somehow neither. Your father is coming, she said. Here. Tomorrow morning. A pause. He's taking emergency family leave. He'll be here for the 8 o'clock meeting. Asterisk. Malik processed this. His father did not take emergency leave. He had taken emergency leave exactly once in Malik's memory, when Angela had been in the hospital 2 years ago. That was the standard his father applied to the phrase emergency. What did they say to him? Malik asked. On the phone. When he called the school. Angela looked at him carefully. He didn't call the school, she said. He called his JAG attorney. The words sat in the car between them. Why does he need a lawyer? Malik asked. And Angela opened her mouth to answer, and then her phone rang again. She looked at the screen, and whatever she saw there made her go very still in a way that was different from before. Not the stillness of processing, the stillness of recognition. She turned the phone so Malik could see the name on the screen. It was Principal Vance, calling at 4:17 in the afternoon, 45 minutes after Malik had left his office, which meant something had changed. Answer it, Malik said. She already was. The Vance call had lasted 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Angela knew because she watched the timer on her screen the entire time. The way you watch something you need to measure precisely so you can report it accurately later. Vance had started with an apology that wasn't quite an apology, the kind built from careful language designed to acknowledge discomfort without admitting cause. He'd used the word miscommunication twice. He'd said he wanted to revisit the conduct notation before anything was formalized. He'd said Mrs. Hargrove had provided some additional context that he wanted to discuss in person. Angela had asked one question: has the conduct notation been filed? A pause. Not yet. Then we'll discuss it tomorrow at 8, she said, with my husband present. Another pause, longer this time. Of course. She'd ended the call and sat with the phone in her lap. Malik had not asked what was said. He'd watched her face instead, reading it the way he'd been reading her face his entire life, and whatever he found there had made him turn and look straight ahead through the windshield without speaking. They'd driven home in near silence. Marcus Thompson landed at 6:47 the following morning. He had taken a military transport to the nearest airfield and a rental car from there. 2 hours of driving in pre-dawn dark, arriving at their apartment at 6:15, still in civilian clothes, a garment bag over his shoulder containing what Angela already knew was inside. Malik was awake. He'd barely slept. He was sitting at the kitchen table when his father walked through the door, and he stood up the way he always stood when Marcus entered a room, not from training, just from something inherited, some instinct toward presence. Marcus set the bag down, crossed the kitchen in 4 steps, put both hands on Malik's shoulders and looked at him. "You did everything right," he said. "Not it'll be okay. Not don't worry." That specific sentence, delivered with the weight of someone who had reviewed the facts and rendered a judgment. Malik's jaw moved once. He nodded. Marcus held his gaze for another moment. Then he let go, picked up his bag, and went to change. They arrived at Jefferson Middle School at 7:52. Marcus wore his Class A dress uniform. Every decoration in its precise location. 4 stars on each shoulder catching the morning light as he stepped out of the car. The uniform was not a performance. Angela knew that, had always known that. It was the same logic he'd applied his entire career. When the situation requires you to be undeniable, you leave nothing ambiguous. Their JAG attorney, Captain Renata Cruz, was already in the parking lot. Small, precise, a woman who moved like someone accustomed to rooms that underestimated her. She had a briefcase and an expression of focused neutrality. Behind them, a second car pulled in. The district superintendent, Dr. Elaine Marsh, who Angela had called at 7 the previous evening, not to threaten, but to inform. "My husband will be present tomorrow. I wanted you to be aware before the meeting." A pause on Marsh's end. Then, "I'll be there." She was there. They walked across the parking lot in the early morning quiet. Marcus and Angela side by side, Cruz slightly behind, Marsh 3 paces back, and the effect of it was less like an entrance and more like a reckoning arriving at its own pace. The front door was held by a student who froze when he saw them, then held it wider, eyes tracking the uniform in the involuntary way people track things that carry gravity. The receptionist, Donna, was at her desk when they entered. She stood up. Not because protocol required it. Because something in the room shifted when Marcus Thompson walked through the door, the way air pressure changes before a storm, not dramatic, just undeniable. She was on her feet before she'd made a conscious decision to stand. "General Thompson," Angela said quietly, "this is Donna. She was kind on the phone yesterday." Marcus looked at Donna, nodded once, with the specific courtesy of someone who notices the people that others routinely overlook. Donna said good morning in a voice slightly smaller than her normal one. They were shown to the conference room adjacent to Vance's office. Not his office, the conference room, which fit more people and had a longer table, and which someone had decided was the appropriate venue, which told Angela that Vance had spent part of his evening rethinking the geometry of this meeting. Mrs. Hargrove was already seated when they entered. Angela saw her register the uniform before she registered anything else. A rapid recalibration happening behind her eyes. The kind of adjustment that occurs when the world rearranges itself into a shape you hadn't prepared for. Her hands, folded on the table, tightened slightly. Beside her sat a union representative Angela didn't recognize. A man with a notepad and the particular practiced calm of someone paid to remain calm. Vance stood at the head of the table. He extended his hand to Marcus. Marcus shook it. The handshake lasted a normal amount of time and contained within it every word neither man said aloud. "General Thompson," Vance said, "thank you for." "Where is my son?" Marcus said. Not a sharp question. Not hostile. Just direct. The way a man asks for the most important thing in the room. We thought it best, given the nature of the meeting. I'd like him present. A beat. Of course. Donna was sent to get Malik from the waiting area near the front office where Angela had asked him to sit. He appeared in the doorway 90 seconds later, backpack on, his father's portrait in his hands, because he had brought it again, because he was the kind of person who brought his evidence back to the room where it had been dismissed. He saw his father standing at the table in full uniform. He stopped in the doorway. Marcus turned, looked at his son. Then he pulled out the chair directly to his right and waited. Malik sat down. Marcus sat beside him. Captain Cruz placed her briefcase on the table and opened it without being asked. She removed a single folder, not thick, not theatrical, just present, and set it in front of her. Mrs. Hargrove looked at the folder. Then she looked at Vance. Vance cleared his throat. "I think we should begin with." "I'd like to begin," Cruz said, "by confirming something for the record." She opened the folder. "Mrs. Hargrove, can you confirm that on the afternoon of the 14th, you gave Malik Thompson a grade of 47 on his presentation before he had completed reading it?" The room went completely still. The union representative leaned toward Mrs. Hargrove and said something in a voice too low to carry. Mrs. Hargrove straightened in her chair. "I evaluated what was presented." "You began marking the grade sheet at the 32nd mark of his presentation," Cruz said. "We have a witness statement to that effect." Hargrove's mouth opened. Closed. "The witness," Cruz continued, "without inflection, without theater, the way facts are delivered when they do not require decoration, is another student in the class. Who came forward this morning. Voluntarily." Angela looked at Marcus. He was already looking at Malik. And Malik, for the first time since this began, was not looking at the table or the portrait or the floor. He was looking directly at Mrs. Hargrove, with the steady, patient expression of someone who had been told his entire life to tell the truth and stand in it. And then Cruz reached back into her briefcase and produced a second folder, thicker than the first. She set it on the table and did not open it yet. "I also need to discuss," she said, 11 prior complaints. The color left Mrs. Hargrove's face in a single, visible instant. And the union representative's pen stopped moving. And Principal Vance, for the first time since they had entered this room, stopped looking at Marcus Thompson and started looking at the door. The way a person looks at a door when they are calculating, for the first time, whether it is still possible to leave. Cruz looked at him. "Mr. Vance," she said, "I'd like you to remain seated." Captain Cruz did not open the second folder immediately. She left it on the table in front of her, closed, centered, present, and let the room sit with it for a moment the way a surgeon lets a room sit with silence before making the first incision. The union representative had stopped writing. His pen rested against his notepad at an angle that suggested he had set it down mid-thought and not yet decided whether to pick it up again. Mrs. Hargrove was looking at the folder. She had not looked away from it since Cruz placed it on the table. "Before I continue," Cruz said, "I want to establish something for everyone in this room." She looked at Vance, then at Hargrove, then at the union representative in a sequence that was entirely deliberate. This meeting was requested by the school as an academic conduct discussion regarding a 12-year-old student. What it has become, as of this morning, is a preliminary inquiry under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Those are different things. I want everyone to understand the distinction before we proceed. The union representative picked up his pen. "My client," he began, "has not been accused of anything yet," Cruz said. "I'm establishing context. You're welcome to speak when I've finished." A beat. He set the pen back down. Superintendent Marsh, who had been seated at the far end of the table with the particular stillness of someone who understood that the less she said in this room the better, shifted slightly in her chair. Cruz opened the folder. The complaints were organized chronologically. Cruz did not read them all aloud. She was too precise for that, too aware that volume was not the same as impact. She selected 4. She read the relevant sections in the same even tone she had used for everything else, and the effect was cumulative and devastating precisely because it was calm. The first was from September, 3 years ago. A parent named Maurice Carter, Deshawn's father, Angela realized, who had submitted a written complaint to Principal Vance alleging that Mrs. Hargrove had accused his son of stealing a graphing calculator that was later found in the teacher's supply cabinet. The complaint requested a formal apology and a review of classroom practices. Vance's response, dated 11 days later, was a single paragraph concluding that the matter had been reviewed internally and addressed. No record of any apology. No record of any review. The second was from a mother named Patricia Okafor, 14 months ago. Her son had been in Hargrove's class 2 years prior. The complaint documented 4 separate incidents, including the plagiarism accusation Malik had described, and requested that the district conduct a bias review of Mrs. Hargrove's grading practices. Vance's response cited insufficient evidence of systemic pattern and closed the matter. Cruz set the page down. Insufficient evidence, she said. That was after complaint number 7. The room was absolutely silent. Vance's hand was flat on the table. Not gripping anything. Just flat. The way hands go when the body is trying to appear relaxed and failing. There are 11 complaints in this file, Cruz continued. 9 of them involve black or minority students. 8 were filed with Principal Vance directly. 3 were also filed with the district office. She looked at Marsh. Dr. Marsh, were you made aware of any of these 3 district-level filings? Marsh's expression did not change, but something behind it did. I was not. They were filed with the district grievance coordinator, a woman named Sandra Hill, who reports to the deputy superintendent, who reports to you. Cruz paused. I mentioned this not as an accusation but as a documentation gap that will require explanation during the formal review. Marsh said nothing. She did not need to. The word review had entered the room and everyone in it understood that it would not be leaving. Mrs. Hargrove spoke for the first time since Cruz had opened the second folder. I have dedicated 20 years to this school, she said. Her voice was controlled, but underneath it, at the very bottom of it, something was working hard to stay in place. I have given everything to these students. Every student. I have never. She stopped. Started again. These complaints are from parents who are unhappy with grades. That's all this is. Cruz looked at her. Complaint number 4, she said, is from a parent named Denise Washington. Her daughter Aisha was in your class 18 months ago. The complaint states that you told Aisha, in front of her classmates, that she had gotten an answer correct by accident. Cruz set the page down. Aisha is 11 years old. She had gotten 3 correct answers in a row. Mrs. Hargrove's mouth was open. Complaint number 9 is from a father named James Obi. His son Marcus, different Marcus, was accused by you of copying from a white student during a quiz. You seated them 6 rows apart, administered a second quiz, and when Marcus scored higher on the second one than the first, you reported it to the principal as evidence of cheating on the first. Cruz paused. The boy had studied harder after the accusation. That was your evidence. The union representative put his hand briefly on Mrs. Hargrove's arm. She did not seem to feel it. I didn't, she started. Mrs. Hargrove. The union representative's voice was low and urgent. Don't. She stopped. And the silence that followed was different from every silence before it in this room. Not the silence of shock or of waiting, but the silence of something that had been running for a long time finally running out of road. General Marcus Thompson had not spoken since asking for Malik to be present. He had sat beside his son with his hands folded on the table and his posture exactly what it always was. Not rigid, not performed, simply the natural bearing of a man who had spent 30 years learning to be completely still under pressure because stillness was a form of authority that no one could take from you. Now he turned. Not to Vance. Not to Hargrove. Not to Cruz, who was doing the work that needed doing with the precision it required. He turned to Malik. Malik was looking at the table. The portrait of his father sat beside him, face up, the 4 stars catching the fluorescent light of the conference room. He had not said a word since sitting down. He had listened to every complaint read aloud, each one a child whose name he might or might not have known, whose experience had echoed his own in frequencies he'd felt but never had language for, and the weight of all of it was visible in the set of his shoulders. Marcus looked at his son for a long moment. Then he gave him a single, slow nod. Not it's over. Not you won. Not any of the things that would have been easy and incomplete. Just, I see you. I have always seen you. That was never in question. Malik looked up. met his father's eyes. And something in his face, the 12-year-old armor, the careful composure, the trained stillness he had inherited from the man sitting next to him, shifted slightly. Not broke. Shifted. Like a door opening a precise and controlled amount. He nodded back. Vance cleared his throat. Given everything presented here today, I think it's clear that we need to. Mr. Vance. Cruz turned to him. Before you speak, I need to inform you that this morning, at 7:45, a formal civil rights complaint was filed with the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights on behalf of 9 of the 11 families represented in this folder. She closed the second file. That process is now independent of anything decided in this room. Vance stared at her. What does that mean? He said. Practically. What does that mean for the school? It means, Cruz said, that this school is now under federal review, which means that every decision made in this building regarding any of the affected students, including Malik, is now part of an active federal record. She looked at him steadily. Every decision, including ones made in the last 48 hours. The conduct notation. Vance understood. She could see him understanding it, the full architecture of what had been built in this room this morning, and the specific location of the stone he had placed in it the previous afternoon. He looked at Angela. Angela looked back at him with the expression of a woman who had spent 17 years absorbing the cost of other people's decisions and had, this morning, decided to stop. The notation, Vance said carefully, has not been filed. I know, Cruz said. That's the correct answer. She began placing documents back in the folder. The meeting was not over. Everyone in the room understood that this was a beginning, not a conclusion, that the machinery now in motion would take months to complete, that nothing was resolved simply because it had been exposed. But something had changed in this room. Something permanent. And then Malik's phone buzzed on the table in front of him. He looked at the screen. A text message from a number he recognized. Deshaun. 3 words. Check the hallway. Malik looked up at his father. Marcus, who had already seen the message, gave a small nod. Malik pushed back his chair and walked to the conference room door and opened it. The hallway outside was not empty. There were 7 people standing in it. Parents, he realized. Adults he didn't know, some of them, and one he did, Deshaun's father, Maurice, in his work uniform, cap in his hand. Standing in a school hallway at 8:30 in the morning because someone had called them and told them what was happening in this room and they had come anyway. And at the far end of the hallway, leaning against the lockers with his arms crossed and his jaw set, was Deshaun, who had been the witness, who had come forward voluntarily, who had known, and said so. Malik stood in the doorway. And then his phone buzzed again. This time it was a number he didn't recognize. A 202 area code, Washington, D.C. And below it, a text preview that made him stand completely still in the conference room doorway with 7 parents in the hallway and his father at the table behind him and everything in motion around him. The preview read, "This is the Washington Post. We'd like to speak with your family about." The rest was cut off. Someone had called the press. And Malik had no idea who. The week between the conference room and the assembly was not quiet. It moved the way consequential weeks always move, too fast in some places, unbearably slow in others, full of phone calls and documents and conversations conducted in careful language by people who are now very aware that everything they said was part of a record. Mrs. Hargrove did not return to Jefferson Middle School on the Tuesday following the meeting. She did not return on Wednesday. By Thursday, the district had placed her on administrative leave pending the outcome of the federal review, and by Friday a substitute had been installed in room 114 with no explanation offered to the students beyond Mrs. Hargrove is unavailable. Principal Vance was still in his office, technically, but Dr. Marsh had appointed an interim co-administrator, a woman named Dr. Patricia Webb, brought in from the district office, and the effect was immediate and visible. Webb moved through the school with the specific energy of someone sent to fix something and given actual authority to do so. She introduced herself to Malik on Wednesday morning in the hallway outside the front office. She shook his hand like he was a person, which sounds like a small thing and was not. The Washington Post inquiry, the text that had arrived as Malik stood in the conference room doorway, had come from a reporter named Diane Chen who covered education policy. Angela had spoken with her twice, briefly, providing only confirmed facts and no commentary beyond what was already documented. The story ran on Thursday. It was measured, accurate, and did not use Malik's photograph or full name. It used the phrase "a pattern of documented racial bias" and cited the federal complaint. By Friday afternoon, the story had been shared 40,000 times. Malik did not read the comments. His father told him not to, and he trusted that instruction. The assembly had been Webb's idea. She had come to Angela with it on Thursday, the day the article ran, sitting across from her in the kitchen of their apartment with her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee and the particular directness of someone who does not have time for anything but the point. "The school needs to acknowledge what happened," Webb said. "Not in a statement. In person, in a room, in front of the students who watched it happen. And I'd like Malik to present his essay. The complete essay. The way it was supposed to be presented." Angela looked at her. "That's his choice," Angela said. Webb nodded. "I know. That's why I'm asking you first." Malik, when Angela brought it to him that evening, was quiet for a long time. He sat at the kitchen table, the same table where he had written the essay 11 days ago, and looked at the window. "Will it matter?" he asked. Not cynically, genuinely. "To some people in that room," Angela said, "yes." He thought about that. "Okay," he said. The assembly was on a Friday morning. The auditorium at Jefferson Middle School held 420 students, and it was full. Webb had made attendance mandatory, which was either a decision that would be criticized or one that would matter. Malik understood, walking in, that those were sometimes the same thing. He sat in the front row with Deshawn to his left and his essay in his lap. Not the original, that had been failed and returned and was somewhere in his folder at home. This was a fresh print, same words, same order, same title at the top in the same font he had chosen 11 days ago because it felt right. "My hero." Webb spoke first. She was brief and unadorned about it. No euphemisms, no institutional language designed to soften what had happened into something more comfortable. She said a teacher had treated students unfairly over a period of years. She said the school had failed to address it adequately. She said that was not acceptable and that accountability was underway. She said a student had told the truth under significant pressure and that the school wanted to honor that. Then she said Malik's name. He walked to the podium. 420 students, none of them making a sound. He looked at the essay in his hands. Then he looked up at the room, at the faces he recognized and the ones he didn't, at Deshawn in the front row with his arms crossed and his jaw set in the way of someone determined not to cry in a school auditorium, at Dr. Webb standing to the side with her hands folded. He found his mother in the back row. She was sitting very still. Her hands were in her lap. He looked for his father and found him in the last seat of the last row on the left side, in civilian clothes, dark jacket, no tie, sitting with his elbows on his knees and his full attention forward. Just a man in a chair. Just a father watching his son. Malik straightened the pages once. Then he began. "My hero is my father. His name is General Marcus Thompson. And before I finish talking, I'm going to prove everything I'm about to say." His voice was steadier than it had been in room 114. Steadier than it had been at any point in the last 11 days, which had asked more of him than he had known he had. He read every word. The part about enlisting at 19. The part about Iraq. The part about the Bronze Star that Marcus never talked about. The part about leading thousands of people through conditions that changed by the hour, and doing it with the steadiness of someone who had decided, a long time ago, that being scared and being capable were not mutually exclusive. The part about the stars. When I was 5, I asked my dad what the stars on his uniform meant. He said they meant he was responsible for the people underneath him. I asked how many people. He said thousands. I didn't understand that number then. I still don't, fully. But I understood that he said it the same way he said everything, like it was simply true, and truth didn't need decoration. He turned to the last page. My hero doesn't talk about being a hero. He talks about showing up. About doing the work when you're tired, when you're doubted, when the room you're standing in wasn't built for you and everyone in it knows it. He told me once that you don't demonstrate for the people who won't watch. You demonstrate because that's what integrity looks like when no one is keeping score. He lowered the pages. He was right, Malik said. I know that now. He stepped back from the podium. The auditorium was silent for exactly 2 seconds. Then Dr. Webb started clapping. Then the faculty, the teachers who had watched quietly for years, and the ones who hadn't known, and the ones who had known and said nothing and would have to live with that, rose from their seats in the rows along the side walls. Then the students. Not all at once. The way real things happen, unevenly, imperfectly, spreading from the people who felt it first to the people who needed a moment to decide. Deshaun was already standing. Malik stood at the podium and looked at 420 people on their feet and felt something he didn't have a word for. Not triumph, not relief, something quieter and more durable than either of those. In the back row, Angela Thompson pressed 2 fingers to her lips. She had made that gesture his entire life. At his first steps, at his first day of school, at every moment that had required her to hold something precious carefully. He knew it. He had always known it. He found his father last. Marcus Thompson had not stood up. He was still in his chair in the last row, still leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Still watching. Still the way he had always been, present, completely, without performance or announcement. His expression was not pride. Exactly. Pride implied surprise. It was something older than that. Something that said, I knew. I have always known. I was waiting for the room to catch up. He met Malik's eyes from across the auditorium. And then, very slightly, he smiled. 3 weeks later, Malik's advanced academic program application was approved. He found out on a Tuesday afternoon, walking home, when the email arrived on his phone. He stopped on the sidewalk, the same sidewalk he walked every day, the same cracks, the same corner, the same storefronts, and read it twice. He called his father. It rang twice. Malik. I got in. A pause. The particular silence of a man receiving news he expected but is allowing himself to feel anyway. I know, Marcus said. You knew. I know you, his father said. Same thing. Malik stood on the sidewalk in the afternoon light with the phone against his ear and said nothing for a moment. Down the block, a kid he recognized from school was shooting free throws in a driveway. A woman was walking a dog that had stopped to investigate a crack in the pavement with the full seriousness of its entire being. Somewhere behind him, a bus went past. Ordinary. Completely ordinary. Dad, he said. Yeah. Thank you. Another pause. Longer. The kind that contains a great deal. Put it in your essay, Marcus said. And Malik laughed, a real one, sudden and unguarded, the laugh of a 12-year-old boy on a sidewalk in the afternoon, and kept walking home. If this story touched your heart, give it a thumbs up, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications for your next dose of powerful storytelling. Wait, don't click away just yet. Our next underdog journey is waiting, and it might surprise you even more. Explore the channel and continue the experience. One story leads to another, and each one proves that being underestimated is often the beginning of something powerful. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.